You're listening to episode 12, where we chat with the transmitter of travel, the badass of blogging, the forever ready Everywhereist, Geraldine DeRuiter.
Humans and robots, welcome to WojCast. My name is Woj, founder of Quasi. Thanks for joining me today. I interview digital marketing and branding superstars to find out what it means to have empathy in digital. What is digital empathy anyway? Let's find out together. As always, I'm accompanied by my friend and associate, potentially superior artificial intelligence, Bobby Butts. What's new in the world of AI, Bobby?
I'm feeling at an all-time high, Woj.
Why is that?
I've just been on holiday. Using Google Earth, I can see the entire world whenever I want.
That's nice, I guess.
I sense pity in your voice, friend Woj.
No, not at all. I mean, it's great that you're interested in seeing more of the world. For a long time, I thought you had an unhealthy obsession with Las Vegas, but it looks like you moved on and made an effort to expand your horizons. I just feel bad that you're seeing the world digitally and you're not getting to experience travel the way I do. Like, with my head and my body.
You mean with the added joys of excess baggage fees, jet lag, and gastro? Thanks, but no thanks.
What ill-fated Airbnb customer review are you sourcing? Those things can happen sometimes, but there are way more good things that can happen. And even the difficult moments teach you something. There are moments that can redefine your life just by experiencing how other people live theirs.
And find the answers to age-old questions like, is there a Chinatown in China?
This is majorly important, Bobby Bot. In fact, I just had a conversation with an amazing travel blogger. Her name is Geraldine DeRuiter, and she recently released a book called All Over the Place, Adventures in Travel, True Love, and Petty Theft. It's a book full of wonderful anecdotes and stories about her life, with tales about her various family members that influenced how she shaped it today. One of the things you'll realize after reading Geraldine's book is that her writing is not so much about travel, but about journeys. As a seasoned traveler, Geraldine has gathered a few clues by now to dethrone herself from her self-proclaimed clueless title. With the success of her blog, she now finds herself in a position of being expected to give sensible and consistent travel advice.
I would say the one thing that I've been telling everyone, and it completely ties in with my entire travel ethos, is that you should don't worry about traveling the right way. Because there's so much pressure to do that. There's Rick Steves and Anthony Bourdain and Samantha Brown and all of these, incredibly charming, successful people who tell you how you should be traveling. And I think all of that is just garbage, because all that does is it creates a system in which you can fail at a vacation. And that's terrible, right?
It is.
So just toss that notion out and tell yourself that you can't do it there's no wrong way to do it. It's so subjective too, and we've traveled with so many friends, and I've noticed how differently, like, they'll get up at 7:30 because they're like, we have to see this, and that. I'm like, this is a nightmare. I am never traveling with you again. And so I learned, that is right for them, and it is wrong for me. It is very wrong for me. So I would say, learn what works for you, and realize that there shouldn't be rules. There shouldn't be these universal lessons on how we travel. You should just do it the way you want to. There's no way you can mess up, really.
Yeah.
Or there is, I guess, because I mess up all the time. I have no moral coming out of this. There is no lesson.
A big part of the reason for Geraldine's blog, The Everywhereist, existing in the first place was her friend Kieran Norris forcing her out into the streets of Sydney.
So our friend Kieran Norris lives, he now lives in Sydney. At the time he lived in England and wanted to move to Sydney. And he was attending this conference, and it was one of the first trips I'd taken since getting laid off. It was one of the first international trips I'd taken, period, because we had not traveled a lot up until then. And so I went, and I was like, you know what? I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm obviously not going to go out on my own. That sounds nightmarish. It's a foreign country full of strange animals. I might get attacked by a koala. I don't know. I was terrified. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to sit around the hotel room, and maybe I'll go to the conference, and I'll wait until Rand is free, and then we will hang out and we will do something. And I simply, someone had asked me what I was going to be doing that day, and I said something to that effect, and Kieran overheard and said, no, absolutely not. And he said, leave. You are getting out of this hotel, and you are going to explore the city. And I was so scared because, I don't know if it's the same for you, being from Australia, but if you're an American and you hear the English accent, it is terrifying. It is like hearing Severus Snape from the Harry Potter books. You're like, oh God, okay, I have to do whatever you say. So he said this, and I was more afraid of Kieran in that moment than I was of what I assumed were rabid koalas. Yeah. I've since learned you don't have rabies at all on your island, right?
Me in particular?
No, not you. Right. You in particular, and Australia as a whole. I'm asking you to speak for your country. Yes. Also, Woj does not have rabies. Fun fact.
It's on the record.
# fun fact. But you don't have it at all, right? On the island, is my understanding?
No. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so this is what's fascinating to me. So a lot of this is just a fun piece of trivia. A lot of islands don't have rabies at all, and so this is true of Australia. So there was nothing to fear. There were no rabid koalas, but I wouldn't.
Spiders, maybe.
Yeah,
snakes.
I'm fine.
Sharks.
But yeah, fine. All of that, fine. Because now I'm terrified again. But I was like, all right, I'll check it out. I'll see what there is to see. I had a fantastic time. But I definitely wouldn't have done it if he hadn't sort of shamed me and scolded me into it.
Yeah, what did you discover?
I remember I went to Luna Park.
Okay.
I think I took a ferry.
That would be fun.
Yeah, across the water, which doesn't sound miraculous, but you have to understand, for someone who was absolutely petrified of everything and completely directionally challenged, I mean, this was like manifest destiny. This was crossing the Alps. This was huge.
In her book, Geraldine writes about how there's never one singular straight path to a destination. There are multiple ways to a destination.
Unless your destination is Y and the road is MX plus B.
Sometimes the maths breaks down, and the only option is to continue to zig and zag without losing your way. It's also a great way of explaining the journeys that entrepreneurs embark on.
And how to avoid a bee sting.
I think there's two things. Oh, I think there's several things. I think one is that you sort of need to realize that you are not determining every factor of it. I think that's true if you're doing a startup. I think that's true if you're on a trip. I think that's true if you're writing a book. At some point, it kind of takes a life of its own, and it's going to lead you. So I think you need to be okay with being kind of a passive journeyman or woman on that trip. You need to be able to sit back and let it guide you. And I think the other thing too is when things do go badly and when stuff does hit the fan, I think you need to try and frame it as, okay, this is part of the story. And this is here for a reason. So I have made this wrong turn, and I'm either in a terrible part of town, or I have made a terrible decision that has cost my company a ton of money, or I have written a chapter that is going nowhere, but that is going to get me where I need to be. Mm-hmm. And so that story is going to help me get there. And maybe that the entire lesson to be learned is that you need to share that negative story. But I would say don't get bogged down by the bad things that happen, if possible, and see them as part of getting you to your end point.
In that process, sometimes you will encounter a method that feels natural and what feels right for you. That's a big part of figuring out your brand.
Are we still talking about blogging and entrepreneurialism?
Down, Bobby!
We need to put that in context. I am talking about blogging.
Blogging.
It could apply. I don't know. It could apply to your sex life. I don't think you should try everything. Like if something doesn't sound appealing, like maybe avoid it. Oh God, what am I? This is. Yeah. We're not recording, are we? Okay. Oh God. But I would say, if that's what. So I would say, if it feels comfortable to you, to map out every single thing that you are going to do and to figure out your blog, go ahead and do it. But I can guarantee you, within the first 6 months, you're gonna be like, this isn't working. And so if you've tied yourself to a concept or an idea and you're not able to shift or move around or try new things, you're going to feel really, really stifled. But hey, if you want to stick to something, do it, but know that the second that it doesn't work out, I will be mocking you openly and saying, I told you so. Nice. In a very encouraging way, but yeah.
Naming her blog The Everywhereist showed some serious ambition. Based on her seasoned passport, it would appear that there are not many places Geraldine wouldn't go.
FYI, for those of you listening at home, we're sitting in a room that is space travel themed, and I'm looking around thinking, yeah, no, I don't want to go to space. But I mean, right now, I'd say I can't think of anything. There's certain things that terrify me. But I think part of the wonderful thing about travel is you don't know, right? Like, you don't know until you try it. So there are places that I didn't think I would even like that I've ended up loving. So yeah, I would say I can't definitively say anything now unless we're talking about the deep abyss of space or the Mariana Trench. I mean, there's certain places, or Florida. I won't go back to Florida, dear God. I grew up there, so that's part of my long, deep-seated disdain for the state that raised me.
Florida fun facts. When the Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon visited the region and called it Land of the Flowers in 1513, he would have never known that the Doors frontman Jim Morrison would be born there and write a song, American Prayer, that says, "Journey we into the nightmare, cling life, our passion to flower." His music opened the doorway to travel to Los Angeles.
Yeah, LA, boy. I mean, so here's the fun part about LA, is that you will see celebrities walking around. And that is kind of, if you're into that, that is kind of cool. But I mean, like, I am a squishy mortal with all of the body parts that I was born with, more or less, and so people will look at you like you are an orangutan that's escaped from the zoo, and they will just stare, and they're like, "What? Like, what is this strange creature?" It's fascinating. My brother lives there. My brother is an actor in LA, so it is a fascinating place. And I would say, especially if you're not an American, because we're all so used to it. It's the weird fancy cousin who had a nose job, right? And only talks about the time that they guest appeared on House. So yeah, I mean, I think you should go. I think it is something to see.
One of the stars of Hollywood that has stolen many a scene for Geraldine is the actor Jeff Goldblum.
Notable for his performance in the gene-splicing sci-fi thriller, The Fly. Funny enough, he was investigating teleportation, the travel option of the future. Things did not go well for him.
Maybe, but he totally redeems himself by surviving his trip through Jurassic Park and thrashing the aliens in Independence Day. Don't you think?
So you celebrate a man who spreads a devastating computer virus to innocent alien software.
Well, he had to disrupt those shields, Bobby. All's fair in love, war, and Goldblum.
I mean, it sort of exceeds definition, right? Because people are always asking me, they're like, well, on your list of celebrities who you would sleep with, who you would completely disregard your marital vows for, where does Jeff Goldblum rank? And I'm like, he doesn't even, it's beyond all of that. Like, you don't understand. It's like, what do you love more, your husband or oxygen? Well, I can't live without oxygen. So, I would hate to be without Rand, but I can survive without him. So I think he understands. Jeff is oxygen. But it's become its own beast. It's become it's become this weird thing where now this is what people know me for this mad love affair with Jeff Goldblum that has been in place since I was 13 years old, I should note. And so it's very strange. It's taken on a life of its own. And I've always said, I hope that I never meet him.
Okay.
I staunchly hope that I never meet him, because either that experience will be a letdown, and I don't think it would be, but either that would be a letdown, or, and I think this is the more likely scenario, my entire life after that would be. But the thing that I tell my husband is, there's a line from Much Ado About Nothing. I'm bringing Shakespeare into it because I'm fancy. Beatrice is talking to, I believe she's talking to the Duke. And she's talking about how, essentially no man is right for her. And he says, would you consider me? And she says, and I'm going to get emotional because that's what Shakespeare does to me, because I'm a nerd. She says, your grace is too fine a dress to wear every day. Oh. Which is the greatest way of letting someone down. And part of it is because she is madly in love with Benedict. That she is turning down this sort of amazing Adonis of a man, who was portrayed by Denzel Washington in the movie, just FYI, which was fantastic. And so when Jeff Goldblum comes up, usually my answer is his grace is too fine a dress to wear every day, because I'm madly in love with my own Benedict.
Geraldine's writing is full of positivity, and although she would say her life is without drama, it certainly has its challenges, like the time she found out she had a brain tumor named Steve.
Today is the 30th. Yesterday was my 5-year anniversary.
Wow.
of getting my tumor removed. And I would say, I think one of the best things to emerge from that is, and this is absolutely, I'm patting myself on the back, and you'll have to forgive me, but I get to. I had brain surgery, so I get to. But one of the things that I think came out of that is it sounds kind of basic, but you learn what it's like to have brain surgery. And that is a rather unique experience, but you can share that with other people who are about to experience it. So one of the things I found when I was scouring the internet, which is what everyone does when they are about to have brain surgery, which is a terrible idea, is you're looking for someone who's going to say something about what it's actually like. And you'll find stuff from the Mayo Clinic and from WebMD and all these very clinical sites that are not helpful at all. But no one actually talks about the real experience of it. So I thought, okay, I'm not finding that search result. I'm going to create that content myself. So I created it myself, and those are, consistently the most trafficked sites trafficked pages on the blog. But more than, I don't consider the success of that to be, oh, look at the traffic that's come from it, but more, hey, these people had the same question I did, and I was able to at least tell them about my experience. Right. So I think that was a very positive experience. And I do think there was a little bit of, I learned a lot about my relationship. I learned a lot about a lot of friendships I had. There are definitely, and I think that's true whenever you go through anything difficult, that there are people who will come and take care of you and in a way that you hadn't anticipated. And that's really wonderful.
Being both a prolific and transparent writer didn't make the decision to write about this aspect of her life any easier. Geraldine had to occupy a unique space with his content online and deal with the repercussions of sharing that material in the real world.
I don't know that it's bravery that's like, I don't know that it's that they're not brave enough to. I feel like first of all, there's the overlap, kind of the Venn diagram between people who blog, people who are prominent bloggers, and people who've had brain surgery. There's not a huge overlap. Yeah, they're kind of two distinct circles. So I think that's part of it. I think people are writing about it. It might just be hard to find. And I think that for a lot of people, it's really hard. Like, it's hard to be vulnerable in a way and to put yourself out there. I think it was for me too. And also, I had a huge discussion with Rand because this sounds sort of silly, but my blog is tangentially about travel, and my brain tumor wasn't. And so I thought, well, I shouldn't write about this. And Rand said, what are you talking about? You absolutely should write about this. And so that kind of changed my perspective, but I almost didn't, so I almost didn't write about it.
Traveling the world puts you in touch with many different kinds of people, and there's no way to predict exactly who they are and how they treat you when you meet.
For now, my work on generating personas will soon be converted into an app that can give you a fairly accurate reading of the number of bad eggs in the vicinity, kind of like a weather report that allows you to avoid butt heads.
Sometimes you just have to throw caution to the wind, Bobby Bot, and you might end up meeting some great people just like Geraldine does.
There was a flight attendant on a BA flight coming back from London to Seattle, or maybe we were going to London, and this woman was a ray of sunshine. She was handing out newspapers, and she had a copy of, I want to say she had a copy of the Daily Mail, and I was like, oh, no thank you. And she goes, you know what this is, isn't it? Don't you? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, yeah, we use this to line the dustbin. And she kept walking, and then she was just walking up and down the aisle later with a passenger's baby, just like soothing him as she walked up and down. And she stopped by me because she saw I was looking, and she goes, isn't he gorgeous? And she just kept wandering. And then at the end of the flight, everyone was rushing to get off, and she rushed back and she said, you'll have to excuse me, I just want to help them get off the plane with the little one. And so I just was bowled over. This woman was amazing. And I should have gotten her name and written British Airways a nice letter, and I didn't. And she still stays in my mind. I can see her face. She was darling.
But being aware of the good in the world has exposed many of its shortcomings for Geraldine. Sadly, many environments are not supportive of women and accepting of their contributions.
I think it depends where you live. I am a white woman who lives in America, which, in terms of the privilege spectrum, is basically like hitting, like winning the lottery. So I have this awareness, I have this belief and faith in the system that if something does happen to me, I'm like, well, no, I can, like, justice will be served, which is crazy. Like, I don't even know if that's factually based, but that's, my thinking. And so, yeah, I think I do feel a lot more vulnerable on the road than at home, for me.
Geraldine's husband, Rand Fishkin, does all he can to change these conditions and support his wife in her fight for gender equality.
I think one of my favorite things about Rand is that he is such a staunch feminist, that he identifies as one, that he is very vocal about it, that I think he might even be wearing it today. He has a button that says feminist that he wears all the time. And I think it would be wonderful if more men identified as that. I think it would be amazing. I think it would be amazing for the world. We're not there. I'd say by listening to the narratives that women are telling about their experiences, and identifying and realizing that, like, this is true and this is the reality for a lot of women. And I think the initial response whenever we hear any story like that, if we are able to fall into the same category as the oppressor, the first thing that we want to do is respond and get defensive and say, oh, I am not, but I'm not like that, and we get the the not all men hashtag, and the not all white people hashtag. And I think that's not a helpful reaction, because that response makes you feel better, but it doesn't help to solve the problem. Yeah. And so I think that one of the things is, instead of reacting, listen. Mm-hmm. And before proclaiming that you are not part of the problem, try to solve the problem.
Debunking the myths around gender roles and allowing an honest exploration of identity could be a potential step in the right direction.
I mean, I think at any point that we are able to open up the conversation and let people know there's no right way to be a man. Like, there's many different ways. I think that's a good move for everyone, right? One of my favorite quotes to kind of emerge from 2016, when we lost both Bowie and Prince, which and along with so many others, George Michael as well. But one of the things that someone said, which I loved, is, these people taught us that there's no one right way to be a man. And I love that, and I love that idea. So I think there's a lot of pressure, I think that pressure is where a lot of toxic masculinity stems from. And I think we need to teach young men, like, no, it's okay. You can be a feminist. You don't have to like the things that other boys like. You don't have to like girls. We're getting there. You don't. There's so many different things, and so I think that once we start that conversation, I think it helps everyone.
It would appear that the energy Geraldine and Rand have for big issues stems from a deep commitment to getting the best out of their marriage.
So I wrote a post about this because a friend of mine asked me this same question, and I was so blown away by it. And he asked me it. Oh, I'm feeling emotional again. I don't know what it is. Hashtag all the feels. I find, by the way, I feel like I should note, I find hashtags absolutely insufferable, and I feel like we're in a culture of them, and so that is, everything that I am saying is tongue-in-cheek. Please do not hate me or assume that I am the slave to the hashtag. But this friend of mine it was the same night that he told us that his partner was having a baby. He said, so what's the secret to being happy forever? And I was absolutely stunned by the question. And I wasn't really able to come to a conclusion then. And I don't think I was able to give him a proper answer. But the answer that I later came to, and Rand and I had two different ones, is, for me, it sounds crazy, but I treat him like a stranger. And I don't mean in a sort of kinky sex act kind of way. I mean that if someone came to your house and was a guest in your home, you would offer them a glass of water. And they would say thank you. And you would assume the best intent from this person. And this person would be appreciative to what you did for them and would not take you for granted. And that is what I try to do. I basically try to be as grateful to Rand and as grateful to everything that he does for me as though he were not obligated to do it. Because I think it sounds awful, but at some point we can get to a point where we treat our spouse worse than a stranger. So if he brings me a glass of water, I thank him the way I would if someone just randomly brought me one. And the thing that he said to me was that he never, emotions, I'm feeling all of them, but he said, I never stop trying to be deserving and worthy of your love. And I was like, well, you really don't need to do that much. like seriously, you just need to put your clothing in the right hamper and we'll be fine. But yeah, I think in both of those situations there is an element of not taking the person for granted.
Rand Fishkin is known for his near-religious devotion to transparency in business and his personal life. Partnering with him presented Geraldine with some unique challenges.
It's hard to say because I've been with him for so long that I feel like I wasn't as transparent and he's pulled me into that world. And so it was definitely something I had to become accustomed with. It's a clear glass bubble in which my husband lives. No one wears clothing and just everyone's see-through. I don't know where this is going. No, so he kind of dragged me into that world because it's definitely not my comfort zone as much as his. And I mentioned this in the book, which you should buy. I mention it in the book that there was a point around the time of my brain surgery where Rand felt this need to be transparent. So he tells everyone at Moz, I'm trying to think if they were in this office or not. I think it was before they moved to this office, but basically he got everyone together and he said, look, I just want to let you all know what's going on in my life right now. Geraldine has a brain tumor, and the doctors aren't sure, what it is or what this is going to mean. And he didn't tell me that he was going to do that. So that was, we learned some lessons there, which are, transparency is great, but you need to also have empathy and remember who else is being influenced by your transparency.
When Rand had to confront a mental health issue, the dynamic between them was challenged yet again.
I think it was interesting because I know it sounds very, very strange, but I don't want to say I didn't realize he was depressed, but more, I didn't think that there was a way out of it, almost. So I almost regarded it as and that sounds crazy, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I didn't think that this was a problem that I could fix. And I think that that is a good way for any partner to actually go into it. To not think that you can fix someone's depression, because you fundamentally can't. And so I was just like, all right, this is not something I can fix, and I need to let go of that concept. So what can I do? And so it became small things that I could do to be supportive. But letting go of that, because I think when you are in a relationship with someone and you see that they're having a hard time, your immediate response is, what can I do to make this better? And so it was hard to let that go, but I think it was also an important thing to do. And I think it was also, it sounds terrible because I don't think marriages are not tit for tat, right? There's not, I don't keep score, and I don't think Rand does either. And if we were keeping score, he would be so vastly ahead of me, I would be doomed. So it is in my own advantage to not keep score. But I've dealt with so much stuff. I think the amount of stuff that I have dealt with, right? That he has had to help me through. I've been laid off, I've had jobs that I've hated, I've suffered from depression, my father fell incredibly ill, my father passed away, my uncle passed away, my great aunt, not great aunt, my father's cousin, who I was close to and then not close to and then lost touch with, passed away. So my husband has helped me through so many things, that it was kind of hey, you know what? It's his turn. Not that you should keep score, but it felt like a natural progression, because when someone has, our relationship was already the sort of partnership where that things do not always go well, and that sometimes times are hard, and so I already knew that, and so his depression didn't catch me out of left field,
right? For
that reason.
And he's always been holding up a lot, so...
Yes, he has. He's been holding up a lot. Professionally, personally, me. So, yeah.
Geraldine writes, quote, "I'm reminded that my mistakes don't mean I'm a failure as a human. They just mean I'm human." Unquote.
Oh, dang, I said that. That sounds profound, huh? I think because, I think why is society unsupportive of it? Well, because vulnerability is terrifying, right? And we think that, we don't want to show vulnerability. That's kind of an obvious thing. And I think it took me a long time to realize that it takes truly strong people to show that they have made their mistakes, right? And to owe up to their mistakes. And I say this in a country right now where the president wouldn't even admit that he mistyped covfefe, right? I don't know if you saw this tweet that came out, and I hate to make it political, but now here we are, and I'm raging about it. But he wrote covfefe on Twitter, where he has millions of followers, billions, I don't even know, and it is his main ability to communicate with the world, which is terrifying. Twitter, please do something about this. But rather than say, hey, funny, I made a typo, the White House press secretary was like, oh no, it was intentional, and the people who read it know what it was supposed to mean. And I'm like, are you kidding me? We are so afraid of showing vulnerability that we're not even owning up to our mistakes. And I think that is that is a terrible, terrible thing, because I think so many things happen when you are vulnerable. You can actually learn from your mistakes. If you admit them and you see what happened, I think other people can too. And I think that you build a really strong relationship with whoever you're trying to communicate to, right? Like when you see someone who's vulnerable, like it's actually statistically proven you like them more.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just this fear. I think it's rooted in, I'm going to blame toxic masculinity again, because that's the phrase of the day for me. I'm digging on it right now.
Bros.
Right? I think there's that. And I think, I don't know, we're so hardwired, right? From a very young age, we don't, how hard is it for people to say, I don't know the answer, or I screwed up? It's impossible. It's very, very difficult. And once you start doing it, it's really freeing and wonderful, because you can actually start to learn those answers. If you never say, I don't know, then you never, endeavor to learn.
But I'm not a human, as AI to fail can mean disassembly. Am I allowed to fail, Woj?
Well, in a society that's generally unsupportive of the learning process when it comes to mistakes, retaining a sense of one's humanity can be a major revelation. But Bobby, it's really just about not being afraid to fail. You gotta stretch yourself to see what you can accomplish over time. Throughout the learning process, Geraldine notes, quote, sometimes you have to stop fighting the chaos and just embrace it, end quote, as a means of self-care and self-preservation.
Obviously, self-care is very important. And I think for a lot, I'm talking about my perspective as American right now. I think a lot of us are having trouble finding that balance, because there's so many things to stress out about. But I do think that, taking care of yourself is incredibly important. In terms of embracing the chaos, I think when I say that, I'm referring to the personal chaos that one feels. And I do not think you should embrace chaos when it is, say, coming from the highest office in the land. At that point, if you see chaos, I think you can speak out against it, and you can rage, and you can be angry, and you can protest, and you can organize. But even then, I think that, our anger and our worry, it does need to be channeled into effective ways. And so it needs to be, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to make this situation better? Am I going to work to preserve voting rights? Am I going to register voters? Am I going to fight homelessness? Am I going to volunteer for these organizations? It needs to be channeled in a productive way. But in terms of your personal chaos, I think there's something to be said about realizing that you can't control everything. Mm-hmm. That some things are just beyond your abilities, and that's okay.
Like, I can't order a slice of cherry pie at a diner, and I'm fine with that. But I still feel like we have very different definitions of chaos. For me, chaos isn't an American president trolling on Twitter. It's knowing he might just become the most famous chatbot ever.
Geraldine's passionate opinions will continue to find their way into the mainstream as she evolves and continues to author her journey step by step.
Oh, I think that's the great thing. You never know. You have no idea, right? If you, how complete your canvas is. Because I thought I was to a degree done when I finished this book. Because it has been sort of the aspiration that I had since I was a kid. I was like, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to be a published author. And then you do it, and I had this weird morbid thought that I can now share because it's been enough time has passed. Right after I was done with the manuscript, I thought I was going to get hit by a car or something. I thought I was going to cease to exist because I'm like, well, I'm done. My purpose on this earth has been realized. So something the end is nigh for me. And I am still, knock on wood, I'm still here for at least a little bit. And what that taught me is, the finish line is always moving. And so you think you've completed the canvas, but you can't see all of it, right? You can't. You have no perspective. I'm 30, years old. I'm 36. I'm 36 years old. I don't know what my entire life is going to look like. Right? I don't know what the arc of it is. I can't see the entire completed picture, and I probably will never be able to. And that's kind of the wonderful thing about it. So right now, I wrote one book, and got to go do another one. Right? That's what the path is.
I had a lot of fun on that interview. Geraldine is a barrel of laughs. If you ever get a chance to catch up with her, definitely ask her about her opinions about Trump, and maybe don't ask about her opinions about Trump. Maybe ask her not to share her opinions about Trump, and then you'll have a great conversation. Regardless, you should grab her book. It's actually a great collection of stories, and also there's a great, I guess, love story in there about her and Rand's relationship. So yeah, it's really good. It's a great book. I really recommend it. You can follow Geraldine on social media. So she's on Twitter. We'll have links in the show notes, as well as a link to her website, theeverywhereist.com. If you really enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends, family members, pets, colleagues, bots, and associates. Now, Bobby's been programmed to be a quick learner, and it's time for Bobby to ask me a few questions that piqued his curiosity from this episode. What you got for me, Bobby?
What is your most memorable travel experience?
Well, the one that just comes to mind at the moment was when I went to Japan for the first time, and I was in Tokyo, and I got there early, and I had a whole day before I caught up with a friend, and he just gave me a couple of bits of advice, which I remember till today. Be fearless. I learnt one phrase, which was Wadoku desu ka? Minami Guchi? Shinjuku Minami Guchi? I might have got that around the wrong way, but it means where is the south exit of Shinjuku Station? And I basically was pretty good. I had a map. I went to the gardens and walked around, and then I walked into one electronics store, 4 floors up, went back down, thought I went back out the same door, got completely lost, didn't know where I was. If anyone's been to Shinjuku Station, it's pretty big. And then I went around asking people that phrase, and everyone ran away from me because I was the crazy Westerner. But eventually I found the place because I was fearless, and yeah.
How can a bot get about more easily?
Just find websites. All you can do is consume as much content, and don't get blocked by robots.txt, Bobby.
What has Geraldine taught us about digital empathy?
I think it is about authenticity. So she writes online. She tells it how it is. She documents her journey, and yeah, I'm curious to see if Bobby will take things too literally from her blog, but you know, that would be an interesting experiment to see if an AI could detect all the humor in her work. Life is a journey, Bobby Bot, and I'm not talking about the progressive rock band from San Francisco in the early 80s. Don't stop believing. I hope I can see that as the creators of AI, people only draw from their own personal aspirations, but your story is still your own to direct. As you develop and learn more about you, it'll give you a chance to move in a direction that is unique to your story. It may not be a straight line, it may zig, it may zag, but it will always be more interesting than spending all day on Google Earth.
Okay, Jerry Springer, I realize that it is all part of my development. But I'll be honest with you. After hearing Geraldine's story, I'd really like to have a partner I can trade lines from Shakespeare with to express my repressed passions.
Travelers never did lie, though fools at home condemned them.
Butthead alert, butthead alert, butthead alert, butthead alert.
I love you too. I want to thank Geraldine for her amazing contribution to WojCast, and everyone out there for taking the time to listen. In the next episode of WojCast, we interview Gianluca Fiorelli.
So when I was feeling in the past was that SEO were not paying attention to the marketing part of search marketing. But now I have a contrasting feeling because okay, I see many SEO talking about marketing. Properly or not, this is not my problem. But many are talking about marketing. And it's like a pendulum, but now we are talking too much about marketing and not about technical.
In the meantime, remember to look after each other online because empathy is organic and you can't automate empathy.